We've all been there. That moment where you're left staring at your phone, wondering how someone who once promised to love you could now act like you never mattered. The texts stop. The energy shifts. And you're left not just with heartbreak, but with bruised pride, unanswered questions, and a quiet rage that whispers, "Ha! He's walking away like nothing happened." And in that moment, let's be honest, part of you doesn't just want to heal. You want him to feel it. You want his ego to take a hit. But here's the truth. You don't do that by trying to get even. You do it by becoming unforgettable in a way that doesn't involve chasing him at all. This isn't about being petty. This is about reclaiming your power. Today, I'm going to show you how to turn that heartbreak into leverage, how to make his ego pay for your pain, not through revenge, but through evolution. There's something uniquely disorienting about heartbreak. It's not just the sadness, it's the erosion of identity. One moment you feel like you're part of something meaningful, wanted, chosen, safe, and the next, it's like the ground's been pulled from underneath you. And when the person who caused that pain seems to carry on effortlessly, smiling in photos, moving on, not looking back, it stings even deeper. Because now it's not just pain you're dealing with, it's the bruised feeling of not being enough. That's the moment most people either crumble or chase. They crumble under the weight of their own self-doubt, or they chase closure, validation, some sign that they still matter. But the truth, the real win, isn't in getting him back or getting revenge. The real win is becoming someone who no longer needs him at all. That starts with a choice, a conscious, daily choice to take the pain you're feeling and turn it into momentum. Instead of letting your heartbreak shrink you, let it be the thing that wakes you up. This person may have broken your heart, but now you get to decide what you do with the pieces. You can either keep staring at them, hoping he notices what is done, or you can start building something stronger with them. Here's the psychology that most people miss. When you channel your energy into growth, when you start showing up in your life with more presence, more confidence, more self-respect, that sends a message louder than any words ever could. It says, you didn't destroy me, you elevated me. And that's the one thing an ego can't stand. To know that hurting you didn't break you, it built you. Now let's be clear, this isn't about pretending you're fine when you're not. It's about using the pain instead of letting it use you. Let that ache push you back into the gym, not because you want to post thirst traps for him to see, but because your body deserves to feel strong again. Let the loneliness drive you toward your passions, not to prove anything to him, but to reconnect with the version of you that existed long before he entered the picture. Let the silence from him remind you to get louder about your goals, your growth, your peace. Because here's what happens when you commit to that kind of self-work. You change. Not just on the surface, but deeply. You start attracting new people, new energy, new standards. The version of you that begged for his attention, she evolves into someone who wouldn't even want the version of him that left. And when he sees that transformation, when he realizes you didn't just survive without him, you thrived. And that's when the ego takes the hit. Not because you tried to punish him, but because you made the most powerful statement there is. You were a chapter, not the whole story. So the next time you feel that pang in your chest, the urge to check his profile, to send that one last text, stop, take a breath, and ask yourself, what can I build with this pain right now? That question, asked over and over, is how you stop making him the center of the story and start becoming the author again. Heartbreak may have started this chapter, but who you become from here, that's entirely up to you. One of the hardest things to do after someone hurts you is to walk away quietly. Everything inside you wants to speak, to scream, to make them understand the damage they've caused. You want to send the long message, post the cryptic quote, or maybe even have one last conversation where you lay it all out. Every broken promise, every contradiction, every way they failed to show up. You think maybe if they just got it, they'd finally realize what they lost. Maybe they'd feel guilty. Maybe they'd finally say the words you needed to hear. But let me tell you something that will change the game. The moment you react, you feed their ego. You hand over your power. And the sad truth is, some people want to know they still affect you. They feed on it. And even worse, They rarely feel guilty the way you hope they will. When someone chooses to leave, disrespect you, or treat your heart like an option, your greatest move isn't to try to make them feel bad. It's to vanish. Not as a tactic, not as a manipulation, but as a reflection of your standards. You don't need to throw a fit to prove your worth. You prove it by no longer showing up where you're not respected. And here's the psychology behind it. People expect noise when they hurt someone. They expect confrontation, chaos, or drama. They prepare for that. It makes them feel important. Your anger still revolves around them. But what they don't expect, what they can't defend against, is silence. You removing yourself from their orbit without warning, without explanation, without giving them another chance to wound you with indifference, because suddenly they're not in control anymore. You are. When you disappear with dignity, you're sending a message far more powerful than anything you could say with words. You're saying, I don't need to prove anything to you. I see you clearly now, and I'm choosing me. That kind of confidence is rare. It's disarming. It shakes the ego far more than any dramatic goodbye. This doesn't mean you're not allowed to feel. Of course you're hurting. You're allowed to grieve, cry, scream in your room, talk to your friends, journal until the pages bleed. But the person who hurt you doesn't need front row seats to your pain. They don't get to be the star of your breakdown. You process privately, you rebuild quietly, and you return stronger, not as a statement to them, but as a commitment to yourself. And the best part? When you do this, when you choose dignity over drama, you're not just protecting your peace, you're reclaiming your power. Because now, you're in control of the story. You're not the person who begged, who chased, who lost herself in someone else's inconsistency. You're the one who walked away with grace, knowing full well what you bring to the table and refusing to sit anywhere you're not appreciated. Eventually, the silence catches up to them. Maybe not today, maybe not even next month, but one day, when the thrill of their distraction wears off, they'll wonder why you never came back, why you didn't fight harder, why you didn't leave the door open. And the answer will be simple. Because you knew your worth. Because you understood that someone who truly values you doesn't leave you questioning. And because you loved yourself too much to keep showing up where your presence wasn't honored. That's the kind of exit that lingers, not with fireworks or theatrics, but with quiet, unshakable self-respect. When you go through heartbreak, it's tempting to make your healing look like a performance. You post the perfect photo, you hit the gym hard, you go out looking your best, smiling just wide enough to be seen by the people who still talk to him. Deep down, part of you hopes he sees it and thinks, what have I done? That's a very human reaction. You want the person who hurt you to feel the weight of your absence. You want them to see that you're thriving, to know they lost something valuable. But here's where most people go wrong. They confuse self-improvement with a show and healing with revenge. The moment your glow up becomes about him, it's no longer about you. You're still giving him your energy, your attention, your purpose, even if it's wrapped in the disguise of strength. The real glow up? It happens when you stop performing and start evolving. When it's no longer about being seen by him, but about finally seeing yourself clearly again. Because the truth is, if your motivation to grow is rooted in his validation, then he's still in control. He's still the center of your world. That's not power. That's just pain dressed up in ambition. But when you decide to become better, stronger, and happier for your own sake, not to prove something to him, but to reconnect with your own potential, that's where everything changes. Think about the version of you that existed before the relationship. Not the perfect version, but the one that dreamed, created, laughed freely, and wasn't trying to shrink herself to fit into someone else's inconsistent affection. That version of you is still there, waiting to be claimed. And now you have an opportunity. Because as painful as heartbreak is, it's also clarity. It rips away the illusions. It forces you to face your patterns, your self-worth, and all the places where you abandoned yourself to be chosen by someone else. And if you're willing to be honest about that, you can rebuild something incredible, not for an audience, but for your own future. Glow up by taking care of your body because it deserves respect, not because you want to make him regret leaving. Read books, learn skills, chase goals because your mind is worth investing in, not because you want to seem impressive on social media. Build a beautiful life filled with new people, new energy, new joy, not so he notices, but so you forget what it felt like to live in the shadow of someone else's approval. There's nothing more magnetic than someone who is deeply, unapologetically focused on their own growth. Not out of bitterness, not out of revenge, but because they realize they are the prize. And here's what makes that powerful. When he does see you, when the photos pop up or mutual friends mention your name or he stumbles across your new chapter, he'll notice the glow. But this time, he won't feel included in it. He'll feel outside of it. Because you didn't glow for him, you glowed past him. And that stings far more than any petty comeback ever could. Healing isn't about being seen by the person who left. It's about finally seeing yourself as someone who never needed them to begin with. And once you start walking in that truth, you stop caring whether they ever look back, because by then, you'll be too far ahead. One of the biggest traps people fall into after heartbreak is seeking proof that they still matter. It shows up in subtle ways. Checking if he viewed your story, watching his activity, asking mutual friends what he's been saying about you. And at the root of it is this deep, almost desperate question: does he still care? The problem is that question keeps you stuck. It keeps you tethered to someone who has already shown you where they stand. As long as you're craving a reaction, you're still giving him emotional power. And here's the hard truth most people don't want to hear. Attention isn't affection, and silence doesn't always mean regret. Sometimes people hurt you and move on, not because you weren't valuable, but because they didn't know how to value you. That's not your burden to carry anymore. The art of indifference doesn't mean you suddenly stop feeling. It means you stop performing those feelings for the person who caused them. It means you learn to separate your healing from their awareness of it. Because the second your peace depends on their remorse, you've already lost control. Indifference is not about pretending. It's not cold, it's not bitter, and it's definitely not fake. Real indifference is rooted in acceptance. It's what happens when you finally stop negotiating with reality. You see things for what they are, not what you wish they could be. There's a powerful kind of strength in getting to a place where you no longer care if they're watching. You're not posting for them, dressing for them, or living in a way that's secretly trying to say, look at me now. You're just living fully, intentionally, on your terms. And that sends a message. Because nothing bruises the ego like knowing that someone you once had emotional influence over has completely withdrawn it. There's no reaction, no breakdown, no chase, just distance, just silence, just freedom. Letting go of the need to be seen by them is one of the most freeing things you can do, because it means you've stopped allowing them to be the judge of your worth. It's easy to get caught up in the idea that if they noticed how well you're doing or how much they hurt you, they'd come back and make it right. But that fantasy keeps you in limbo. It keeps you locked in a waiting room that leads nowhere. Indifference is walking out of that waiting room and closing the door behind you. People are far more drawn to energy that doesn't need them. Think about it. What's more compelling? Someone trying to get your attention, or someone who's genuinely not interested in whether you give it to them or not? That's the energy you tap into when you stop measuring your healing by their response. And ironically, it's that very detachment that often gets their attention, but by then, it won't even matter to you. Because indifference isn't about them noticing, it's about you not needing them to. The shift happens the moment you stop trying to prove something, the moment you realize that real validation doesn't come from being missed, it comes from knowing that your value was never up for negotiation in the first place. And when you understand that, you stop chasing closure, because you are the closure. You become the one who moves forward without needing permission, explanation, or apology. Not because it's easy, but because you've grown too much to keep circling the same dead end. That's not cold, that's clarity. And clarity is the beginning of peace. One of the hardest parts of heartbreak isn't just losing someone, it's the story you start telling yourself about what that loss means. Suddenly, every memory gets twisted. You question your judgment. You replay the mistakes. You wonder if you were too much or not enough, or if somehow, by doing things differently, you could have saved it. That's the dangerous part. Not the breakup, but the meaning you attach to it. And that meaning, that story you create in your mind, becomes the thing that either keeps you stuck or sets you free. When someone hurts you, it's easy to put them in the role of the villain. It gives you a sense of closure, a neat explanation. He was selfish, he never cared. But deep down, there's still that voice whispering, if I had been better, he might have stayed. That voice is the real damage, because that's not just about what happened, it's about what you start believing about yourself as a result. And the truth is, you can't always control how someone treats you, but you can always control the narrative you choose afterward. Reframing the story doesn't mean denying the pain. It doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt or that you weren't invested. It means choosing to see the lesson instead of the loss. Maybe he made you feel like you weren't enough. Maybe he ghosted you, betrayed your trust, or slowly faded without the decency of closure. But that's not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of his capacity. There's a massive difference between someone not choosing you and you not being worth, and that distinction changes everything. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who show us exactly what we need to stop tolerating. Maybe he made you doubt yourself. Maybe he triggered old wounds. But instead of internalizing it, what if you saw it as exposure? A moment that revealed the parts of you that still needed healing. What if the relationship didn't destroy your confidence, it uncovered the areas where you'd been outsourcing it? That's the power of reframing. You stop asking, why wasn't I enough for him, and start asking, why did I think he was enough for me? That's when you start to win. Not because you erased the past, but because you've rewritten what it means to you. He wasn't your forever. He was a reminder, a wake-up call, a plot twist that redirected you back to yourself. When you stop romanticizing what could have been and start seeing what actually was, you begin to recognize that you were never powerless. You just forgot your strength for a while. So often we think closure has to come from them, an apology, a conversation, some form of acknowledgement, but real closure comes from reclaiming the narrative. You get to decide that this chapter wasn't about rejection, it was about redirection. That his inability to show up for you doesn't say anything about your worth, but everything about his limitation. And here's the most important part. When you reframe the story, you change the path ahead. Because the version of you who understands what she learned is not the same version who got hurt. She's wiser, clearer, more grounded in what she will and won't accept. And once you start owning that story, not from a place of pain, but from a place of growth, you'll stop looking back with regret and start looking forward with power. Because you didn't just survive the heartbreak, you evolved from it. And that version of you, she doesn't chase validation, she walks with clarity. There's something incredibly tempting about wanting someone who hurt you to see just how well you're doing without them. It's not even about revenge, it's about redemption. You want them to feel what you felt, to regret, to ache, to realize too late what they had. And while that feeling is normal, it's also short-lived, because even if they do feel it, it won't fix anything. Their regret won't undo the hurt, and their apology won't erase the disappointment. So what do you do with that desire? You channel it. Not into petty wins, but into real ones. The kind that don't just sting their ego, they elevate you. The truth is, there's no better response to heartbreak than building a life so rich, full, and meaningful that their absence becomes irrelevant. That doesn't mean pretending you're fine. It doesn't mean faking happiness for the sake of social media. It means actually doing the work on yourself, your dreams, your peace of mind, so that eventually you stop looking over your shoulder to see if they're watching, because the real magic happens when you're not trying to be seen anymore. Success doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be rubbed in anyone's face. True success is quiet confidence. It's waking up with purpose. It's knowing that you're living a life that reflects your values, your worth, and your potential. And when you create that kind of life, not to prove anything to them, but because you finally believe in yourself, that's when everything shifts. It's funny how timing works. Often, the moment they realize what they lost is the exact moment you no longer care if they ever realize it at all. Because by then, you've outgrown the need for their validation. You're too busy becoming someone you're proud of. That's the sting. Not the outfit you wore, not the party you showed up to, but the fact that they're no longer relevant in a world you've built without them. Heartbreak forces you to look inward. It challenges you to confront your patterns, your self-worth, and your standards. It asks you whether you're going to let this define you or refine you. And the people who come out stronger are the ones who stop looking for revenge and start chasing results. They stop asking, will he see this? And start asking, is this who I want to be? That's when your energy changes. That's when you move differently, not with bitterness, but with certainty. And yes, one day he might see it, he might scroll past a photo, hear your name in conversation, or watch from afar as you keep rising, and maybe for a second he'll feel the weight of what he let go. But by then, that version of you who would have cared will be gone. Because she grew, she built, she healed, not to win him back, but to win herself back. Letting success be the sting means you no longer need their downfall to feel better. You just need to keep building your rise. It's about using the hurt as fuel, not as a script. It's deciding that the best closure isn't found in a text or an apology. It's found in living well, in leveling up so profoundly that their chapter feels small in comparison to what you've become. And the beauty of it is that you won't need to announce it. The life you're creating will speak for itself, because nothing hits harder than realizing the person you thought would always look back no longer needs to. Heartbreak will try to convince you that you've lost something, that you're broken, less worthy, somehow not enough. But the truth is, you haven't lost anything that was meant to stay. What you've gained, if you're willing to see it, is the chance to reclaim every part of yourself that you gave away in the name of love. And that's powerful. Let him think you're quiet. Let him think you disappeared. Let him think you moved on too easily. Because one day, he'll realize what you already know, that the woman he walked away from didn't fall apart. She rebuilt herself, stronger, smarter, unreached. This isn't about punishing his ego. It's about rising so high he can't access you anymore. That's how you make his ego pay. Not with revenge, but with evolution. So stop waiting for an apology. Stop hoping he sees your worth. Start acting like someone who's already found it. Because the moment you do, you'll realize something life-changing.